As the Beijing Winter Olympics 2022 got underway, officials from the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada decided not to show, but rather give a boycott to the Games. They cited lack of human rights, particularly the treatment of the Uyghurs. A diplomatic boycott meant that the leaders from these countries took a pass at the opening and closing ceremonies and all other formal invitations. But was a diplomatic boycott enough to get a message across to the CCP and President Xi? Was it enough bad publicity? Or it didn't matter? It didn't move the needle? Well, it did put the issue of human rights more in the forefront, that's for sure. And after the sensational Summer Games of 2008, also hosted by Beijing, those games were a hard act to follow a second time, even for Beijing. But in addition, and more importantly, the world is less than pleased with the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as China's behavior toward Hong Kong and more of late, toward Taiwan. I'm Terry Gilberg, and this is Timeline with Terry. Today's Timeline topic, America's love-hate with China. I'll be right back.
CTA is a call to action to all conservatives to save America from left-wing radicals.
Nearly 45% of the U.S. workforce already have plans for job hopping in 2021. Now, many of those 70 million job hoppers are just fed up and they're ready to work somewhere else, somewhere where they will be free. Maybe it's time for your talents to go to a city or a company that actually values your freedom. Post your resume on redballoon.work so that you can connect with this ever-growing list of free speech employers who would love to hire you.
Travel is getting back to normal. Now is the perfect time to fly somewhere. You can save up to 75% on more than 500 airlines and 300,000 hotels. Use our free service to find the lowest prices we have. You know you're itching to go somewhere, so make this free call right now. We have all the best airline, hotel, and rental car prices all in one place. The best way to get these rock bottom prices is to call.
Welcome back to Timeline with Terry, where I invite expert guests to spend time with us on the big issues of the day. And one of those is our love-hate with China. Certainly it is a big issue. How did America get so addicted to China? How have we missed what China has been doing on the world stage? The Belt and Road Initiative, most Americans don't even know what it is. Or her dominance of rare earth metals and the mines from which they come. And how should we be handling China now that we're 2 years into COVID-19? Author Ann Bridges of Silicon Valley has written a number of books, but the most intriguing, I think, is this book. It's called Rare Metal. It's a fictional account of a very serious world problem, and that is America's dependence on Chinese rare earth metals. She knows a thing or two about China, and I've invited her to share her insight about how we should be handling China today. Ann Bridges, welcome to Timeline with Terry. So nice to see you.
Thank you, Terry, and it's great to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I see you're out there in San Francisco. Your writing is out of Silicon Valley, and I reference this in my open, Rare Metal. We're going to start with this book for a minute. You've written a number of books, but this is really the one that's so intriguing to me. America used to dominate production as a byproduct of other mining. But due to nuclear and environmental regulations, we have ceded it to offshore. You mentioned this in the background to rare metal. And now China dominates 97% of the heavy rare earths globally, equivalent to Middle Eastern oil production. All right, let's start. Take us back to a little bit of the backstory. When people say rare earth elements, what the heck is that, and why does it matter? It matters so much. I mean, just my cell phone, which I checked right before I got on the air with you, rare earth metals are used in the production of just that alone. So take us back to how China dominates the mines and dominates the production of rare earth metals.
Be happy to. And I first want to reassure your listeners, our generation, possibly uniquely, but our generation going forward, actually, we weren't taught about China in our schooling because China was in lockdown, in essence, from 1920 forward. And while we heard a little bit of Mao Zedong and a little bit of some of the battles he had with the separation of Taiwan, most of what was happening in China for decades was literally blocked from the rest of the world. And so by the time they opened up in the mid-70s with President Nixon going over there famously, and then the information started coming out and getting incorporated into books and into the academics, the world had changed, China had changed. And so a lot of what they had done up to that point was hidden from view. And now you have to look at it kind of skeptically with the propaganda that we see coming out of China and the Communist Party specifically, and realize that a lot of this was purposeful. So with that, don't worry if you don't understand geology. I don't know geology. I'm not a chemist, but I do understand the implications. So basically, everything that's not grown in this world is mined. You've got minerals. We rely on Earth, not for Earth in a passive state, but Earth for all the minerals that come out of it. You take calcium every day. Plants require different forms of fertilizer, and those are all based on what is coming out of the soil. Metal, aluminum, batteries that we all use every day. These are all formed out of metals and have specific properties to conduct electricity, to be malleable into small shapes, into tiny little functions that we use every day in our technology laden lives, MRI machines, healthcare, all these things. We are using them. And what happened in the 70s and early 80s as China was coming out of this terrible Chinese Communist Party lockdown and trying to figure out how they could get their economy going, is someone very smartly recognized that the Mideast had oil, and remember in the 70s, this is when OPEC was holding the U.S. and the rest of the world's feet to the fire, using the oil embargoes to get their way. China said, well, we don't have oil, but we have rare earths. And frankly, they made a very calculating, strategic decision to start mining and start attracting the industry of the world onto their shores. And so that's why ultimately, decades later, our manufacturing is done in China, and we saw this with COVID, with the PPE equipment and testing kits. We simply do not have the capability anymore because we thought that was a great idea to get them on their feet with the entrance, for example, with the World Trade Organization, and to help them join the global economy. The problem is that their purpose as communists is basically to dominate with their ideology and their control. And they have shown a number of times that they are willing to use that dominance in rare earths and critical minerals and manufacturing to get what they want. And you reference this book. This started because in 2010, China actually embargoed Japan on their ability to have critical minerals for their manufacturing, and it basically tanked the Japanese manufacturing sector. And I was waiting for Silicon Valley companies to wake up and say, oh my God, we need to do something about this. And nothing, nada. So I said, well, I'll write a book about it. And I come from the business world, and I kind of created a what if scenario. What would happen if China did that to us and to Silicon Valley technology today? And that was the premise of Rare Metal.
And it's an awesome book too. It's very, very good. It's a fictional tale, but of real stuff that we're confronted with today. You mentioned China with their ideology, Anne. Now, back in the ping pong days with President Nixon, I don't think that administration or administrations that followed, up and through even the Clinton administration, had any idea where China is today, that the CCP, the communist ideology through the CCP, is as alive as it can be. It's been strengthened while they have taken our money. None of this has been at all about changing to China changing to some kind of Chinese democracy. That did not work at all. So here we are. China has gotten richer. We have elevated a lot of their workforce from the rice paddies into factories. So that's good for individuals, although they're still working 6 days a week, maybe 6.5 days a week in those factories to produce. But there hasn't been a change in ideology at all, something that we anticipated. We did not see that coming. In fact, we thought it would be the opposite.
Well, I'll say two things. First of all, up until President Xi, there had been a succession where a president had the presidential powers were split into three. You had the head of the military, the head of the party, and the head of the country. And Xi, when he was elected in 2012, has started to consolidate all that party under one man. And there is some pushback. Yeah, there's some pushback in China right now about whether or not that is the right thing to do. But no matter what, that is where he is today. So the Communist Party and Xi specifically have certainly morphed into much more of a totalitarian state than they were before. And you could argue that that's what always happens with communism ideology, and I would probably agree. But the other strategy I think a lot of the Western world thought was that if we could get the Chinese population to want these Western goods, these Western freedoms, that eventually they would push back. And while you see some of that with some of the younger group that have been educated here, maybe are being pushed too hard, a lot of people don't understand the basic philosophy of some of the Chinese culture that is having it behave a little bit differently than what we saw, for example, the Soviet Union, which still was a Western European country, still based in Judeo-Christian religion, as many people don't realize that, but you do have a Russian Orthodox Christian church. China and the Eastern values is a little bit different in terms of how they view the government, and that has kind of been a sticking point for a lot of people in understanding exactly how to move forward, I think, from where we are in terms of relating to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, not just the Chinese people.
Minerals and metals, top of our conversation, basis for industry and manufacturing. What else China has been doing over the years, and so many Americans aren't even aware of it. If you mention Belt and Road Initiative, they go, what are you talking about? And the belt is, or the road is not exactly a road. The belt is more a road, and it's a little bit opposite. The belt is more the seaports, as I understand it, and the road are the roads that go inland in transportation, if I've got that right. But Americans don't understand the road, the push that China has had into so many countries, and so many countries that can't really afford their own infrastructure at all. So they're kind of stuck in that third world kind of plateau, I guess. So they lean on China. China comes luring with Chinese banks. We can loan you money, etc. But over the years have become beholden to China. And their China is right there at their ports, almost like they're going to pounce and take over. Long-term strategy, Xi's strategy, or not?
Yes, it's a long-term strategy, whether it's Xi specifically or simply a reflection of the fact they have a huge population. They need natural resources. One of the issues, in fact, in the India-Chinese border up in the Himalayas is China wants to build a dam that takes a lot of the glacier melt off and run it into China for water. You saw this with the Three Gorges Dam, that they had to deal with getting fresh water to their people in the cities as well as their agriculture. So a lot of the Belt and Road Initiative actually has been to strategically, not just poor countries, but countries that are rich in natural resources, as well as being, as you point out, logistically significant in terms of shipping. So you see China's huge influence, for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Congo has the most cobalt. Cobalt is used in batteries, the batteries in your smartphone, the batteries in all these electric vehicles. And right now, we have not tapped our own sources for cobalt, even though we have them. Now, Congo uses child labor that has been well documented, and the output of the cobalt from Congo is going directly to China. China brings it over to their manufacturing and processing. Then they manufacturing the batteries, for example, for the Teslas in China, or the batteries there, and then they get exported. So saying that, well, the U.S. doesn't import directly from Congo, yeah, well, that's kind of a misnomer, because we are clearly taking finished products from China, which is using child slave labor. In addition to Uyghur Muslims, we have child slave labor in Congo. And that's just one example. They have started to create a huge presence in South America. South America is rich in a lot of natural resources as well, minerals, copper, gold, silver, nickel, tin. I mean, all the products that we use for electric vehicles, for example, are also found in South America, actually all the way up through South America, Mexico, through California, and into Canada. There's a ridge, the Rocky Mountains, in essence, what we see here. It's a ridge of natural deposits. And we are importing from South America, we're importing from Canada, but we're not developing our own, which is crazy, because when all is said and done, it's being processed through China. The rest of the world is also relying on China for these minerals, and yet they are turning over those resources because China, in addition to locking up the manufacturing, they actually have the know-how in terms of how to process these minerals. So even though, for example, our Defense Department says, well, we'll just stockpile some of these critical minerals, these rare earths. The fact of the matter is, our biggest rare earth mine in California takes its stock, ships it to China, China processes it and sends it right back. So saying that we have a California mine is ridiculous, because we still rely on shipping to China and them cooperating and shipping it back to us.
Well, speaking of mine, when I studied this a while back and read your book a while back, it was my understanding that the mines in Mexico and South America, the United States government had a chance to get the rare earths from there, and even perhaps have a relationship with countries in South America and in Mexico to have a duality of ownership. But we didn't jump on that for various reasons, some over my pay grade why we didn't. But China did, and they started to own the mines outright. Is that still the case today, that most of the mines in South America, even Central America and Mexico, are outright owned by China? So not only manufacturing of the rare earths, but the ownership of the mines themselves, which is very troubling.
It's very troubling, and if it's not 100% owned, it's often a minority position, and in fact, sometimes those minority positions are hidden from view. In other words, it's a Canadian company, or it's a European company, or it's a Russian company, but when you look to see what that company's ownership is, it's 50% China. And then, understand, we're talking about a communist country. China's ownership of corporations is ultimately owned and controlled by the state. So saying, well, it's a Chinese corporation is ludicrous, because that means it's the Chinese government. Mm-hmm. And it's a real problem. We have a mechanism in our own government called the CFIUS, the Council on Foreign Investment. And the problem is, right now, the Secretary of the Interior doesn't sit on that council. It's the Treasury Department, it's Defense. I'm not sure all the different cabinet level posts, national security, I'm sure. But no one has really thought about the fact that minerals should be part and parcel of our national security. And yet, when you really dig down not too far into it, you find out that we rely on China for our actual bullets. We rely on them for night vision goggles. We rely on them, I think, even at this point, for our Jeeps. I mean, we're talking about moving all these things to advanced manufacturing without disclosing simultaneously that the advanced manufacturing is still happening in China.
So it kind of boggles the mind at this point, right? Take a break with Ann Bridges. She's the author of Rare Metal, a Silicon Valley novel. It's a fictional piece, but it's about a very real problem, and that's the dominance of rare earth metals that China has, and we don't, and even owning the mines. We'll also talk about, when we come back, what is happening with the Uyghur Front, and also what's happening with the Taiwan front, and bring us more up to speed on current events there. This is Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilberg. Stick around. I'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried canceling myself and MyPillow. Well, during these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For a limited time, you can get my brand new product, My Slippers, for 50% off. That's the lowest price ever. And remember, My Slippers come with an exclusive 4-layer design. These layers combine to give you amazing comfort and support and help reduce stress on your feet. And with the durable indoor-outdoor sole, you can wear My Slippers anytime, anywhere. I personally guarantee these will be the most comfortable slippers you'll ever own. So go to MyPillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen, or call the 1-800 number below to get My Slippers for 50% off, the lowest price in history. And if you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
Charlize, luxury skincare for real women, because you're worth it.
Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, where every dish has fresh and delicious farm-to-table ingredients that is sure to uplift your taste buds. Experience our creamy grits topped with grilled shrimp in our homemade shrimp sauce. Try our fried whole chicken wings or our marinated lamb chops cooked to your perfection. Come try Costa Coffee. It's the best coffee you've never tasted. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, located at 3205 Cumberland Boulevard, Southeast, Suite 105 in Atlanta. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen. Enter as strangers, leave as friends. Cheers.
The principles of liberty, freedom, and the tenets of our constitutional republic are under attack. That's why we are building freedomsquare.com. Freedomsquare.com, designed to unite freedom-loving Americans. Freedomsquare.com. Freedom lives here.
Centner Academy is a fully accredited independent private school, family operated since 1968, providing a college prep curriculum for students with learning differences in grades 4 through 12. Centner Academy is now hiring talented elementary, middle, and high school teachers. Call 305-576-6070 for more information.
Have you been fired from your job? Do you now need affordable family health insurance? Want coverage as fast as tomorrow? We have it. Affordable family health insurance with no long-term commitments and flexible payments. Medical bills can add up overnight. Could you afford that right now? Now is the time to get the health insurance benefits you need at an affordable fixed monthly cost. Call now to lock in your low monthly rate.
Terry Gilbert. This is Timeline with Terry. I'm on with author Ann Bridges from the Bay Area. She joins us. She knows a great deal about China and has written about rare earth elements or rare metals that are used in our manufacturing of so many items, including our military, items for the military. You write that America is addicted to China, that it's similar to the addiction of Middle East oil, our addiction to Middle East oil in the 1970s. And I like this. Like all addicts, we sulk around searching for easy fixes despite the repercussions. I think that's very true. They've really got us on this. We've lost our capability to defend our country without permission. They've already betrayed Hong Kong, or we have betrayed Hong Kong. And is Taiwan next? And I would add to that the Uyghurs. It seems like with the plight of the Uyghurs, that's the one area, and I'm a little mystified by this because Hong Kong made news, for sure. Taiwan is sort of making news, but what's really hitting us more is the plight of the Uyghurs. Something about human rights, that element is getting through. Why is that? And can that kind of be a turning point a little bit, do you think, for Americans' understanding of what China is all about and start figuring out what to do with her? Because after all, we've been sitting on our hands also with the COVID-19 issue. Nobody is putting their feet to the fire. And there they are with the Beijing Olympics once again, the only country, I think, that's had, the only city that's had both summer and winter ever in the history of the Olympics.
Yeah. So the Uyghur, a lot of people refer to the Uyghurs, they're Uyghur Muslims. And if you remember after the 9/11 attacks, China was one of the countries that stepped forward and said, we will help you with these Muslim terrorists. And that became a justification, frankly, for them to crack down on Muslims. Muslims have always been in the western part of China. It's part of the old Silk Road that connected Persia to China back and forth. Marco Polo famously made that road well known to the West. Sure. But in essence, there was a population of Muslims that settled in Western China. And China is very ethnically conscious, let's put it that way. The Han Chinese are the dominant race, ethnicity, and they believe that they should be the ones in charge. So they basically use the concept of Muslim terrorists to say, well, we can discriminate against this group. And they started slowly. China is wonderful at the concept of boiling frogs slowly, which means you turn up the heat a little bit at a time, no one really squawks, and eventually you're dead. And that's what happened with the Uyghur Muslim regions. They started just pushing and pushing. They started saying we want to develop that area, and so they moved a lot of their own Han population there, first as police, then to settle. Now we hear that they are this is sad, but they are mating with the women there. In other words, they jail the men, and then they marry the Han Chinese with the Uyghur Muslims, and they are basically both polluting, let's say, the Muslim faith and the Muslim bloodlines, as well as perpetuating their Han genealogy. This is also a crackdown on the religion of Islam. They cracked down on Christianity, they cracked down on Falun Gong, and now they're cracking down on Islam. So it is kind of the perfect trifecta. I suppose one of the reasons it's getting some attention now is because of that Islamic tie, that you have many more people aware of the discrimination of the Muslim community throughout the world and are talking about it a little bit more. And people are giving some credence. I mean, it's been 20 years since 9/11. I think the immediate fear has disappeared a lot, and people are looking very closely. And this is also a convenient way to point fingers at China.
Well, I think that's very insightful because when the crackdown came with Falun Gong, that was a spiritual practice, a meditative practice. And when the crackdown came and the invasion, really, of Hong Kong, well, they're Chinese anyway, right? That was China's analysis that came across into our newspapers. They're Chinese anyway. This is all part of us, and we can't have this kind of a democratic rule, even though the British were there for so many years and so on and so forth, and that whole history. But with the Uyghurs, that's really outside of that whole Chinese mindset. All right, let me get your focus on Taiwan for a minute. At this present taping, it might be that Putin will invade in Ukraine. We don't know that, but at least at this taping, that's where we're at. Many analysts say that as soon as he does that, Communist China, mainland China, can also invade, will also invade in Taiwan. And now we're looking at helping two of these vulnerable spots in the world. What do you think? Do you think that's a two-pronged strategy from President Xi and President Putin that even was finalized at the Beijing Games, where other diplomats, other heads of state were never there? Or do you think that's just over-the-top thinking that China will not do this, and what Putin might not do it either? Because as of this taping, we're just not sure.
Well, Xi specifically, but China in general, has a philosophy against direct warfare. Okay, so if you look at what they do, it's very subtle: economic warfare, political stratagems, maybe preemptory actions, but without shots being fired. So when you say, will they attack Taiwan? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they'll simply blockade them. Maybe they will stop shipping critical minerals or rare earths to Taiwan and tank their industry the same way they did Japan. Maybe they will put pressure on the U.S. to do something, and that would then have us, whether in a backroom deal or overtly, say we're not going to defend Taiwan anymore. The tie between Putin and Xi, I really don't know. I remind people that they share a huge border. I also remind people that they are both nominally Communist Party heads. Now, Moscow and most of the developed towns in Russia are way on Western Russia, right? It's more European ties. Russia's a huge country, and I think he has to make sure that his flank is protected from China, but Beijing is far east as well. So you have this big open area that no one really cares much about defending, except nominally to make sure it's there for resources. So the whole resource issue, to go back to your original concept, the whole resource issue is indeed driving it, whether it's rare earths or oil and gas, which we see, Putin is dealing with Germany on this now, whether it's water from the Himalayas, whether it's food. It's just, these are really basic issues, and this is always what countries have gone to war over. The issue really is the war going to be the same way? Information warfare, cyber warfare, hacking electrical grids. These are all tools in the playbook of China and Russia both, actually. So how that ends up involving us, I really can't guess, except I've been saying for a long time that Xi had to get beyond the Beijing Olympics, and he's got until October now before he gets voted in again for a third unprecedented term. So he's got to either show he has leadership and get the people on his side again, or do something very, very drastic so that he maintains a totalitarian kind of control.
And to your point about both men, they're both heads of state. They share a lot of similarities. And I think it's worth mentioning again, reminding our audience that they both have the long view now. Very, very long view. I was reading in, I think, The Diplomat, that President Biden would come to Taiwan's defense. And if Australia comes to help the United States against China's effort for reunification of Taiwan with the mainland, what kind of scenario do you think would ensue? Would it be a quick attack? Would it be a sort of a circling of ships around Taiwan and then an attack? Would it be an air attack? All of the above? How do you see it? And then what would our response actually be, especially if it was quick and dirty, as they say?
Well, I think China would not ever take the first military strike. I think they may fly planes over in threatening motions. As I said, they may do a blockade. And then the question is, how much can you ratchet up that rhetoric and that posturing in order to provoke the U.S., Canada, Australia, and the U.K., I think are now the four key countries involved. I don't know how much any of those will actually take action, because, again, our military is dependent on China, and China knows it. So I think there'll be a lot of posturing, and then you'll go into a lot of discussions and debates, and try to solve the problem. Ultimately, I think the Chinese people support Taiwan being back under Chinese control. And that is a real problem for the Chinese president, because she and her people feel very strongly that they are an independent country. And we've been able to live with that for a few decades. I don't know how far that will go. Hong Kong, I think, was very surprised at how quickly they were run over.
Hold your thought. We've got another break. Ann Bridges is with us for the full hour. I'm Terry Gilbert. This is Timeline with Terry. When we come back, we are going to talk about the Chinese Army and more on Taiwan. Stick around.
CTA is a call to action to all conservatives to save America from left-wing radicals.
Nearly 45% of the U.S. workforce already have plans for job hopping in 2021. Now, many of those 70 million job hoppers are just fed up, and they're ready to work somewhere else. Somewhere where they will be free. Maybe it's time for your talents to go to a city or a company that actually values your freedom. Post your resume on redballoon.org so that you can connect with this ever-growing list of free speech employers who would love to hire you.
The following is a health warning to all liberals. Please do not watch conservative television of America, as prolonged viewing can cause your brain to swell and explode and mess up your couch. CTA values all lives from the first heartbeat in the womb to the last dying breath. Conservative television of America, we say what you're thinking.
Back on Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilbert with Ann Bridges. We're talking about various scenarios with regard to China. She is an expert on China and has written a great book on rare metals and how China dominates the rare earth metal industry with manufacturing and owns a number of the mines. But back to putting perhaps a blockade on Taiwan, no sail, no fly zones, Chinese ships around the island of Taiwan, etc. We've been talking about that. Maybe just starving her out, making her bankrupt. But what's interesting to me, and people don't talk about this a lot, so I want your insight on this. We're told that China now has the largest army on Earth, largest, but it is an untested army. We don't know how powerful the Chinese army is, the Chinese military in general. We just don't know. The Chinese Navy, the Chinese Army, the Chinese Air Force, we don't know. It's untested. What do you think? Do you think if there really was a test, she could prove her mettle or disappoint? And then we say, hey, see, we're still the big dog.
Well, I think a lot of Xi's posturing has been overwhelming force, if you remember the Powell Doctrine, right? And so he always has numbers, just sheer volume, can control a lot of the dialogue and can control a lot of the resources. But I'll tell you, the quality of their output is questionable. I can tell you this, when they were redoing one of the bridges that spanned the San Francisco Bay, and they were inspecting the steel beams, the iron beams that came from China, they were rejected. They didn't even pass muster. And some of those same questions are being asked now about the components that are going into our nuclear reactors, that we are just presuming that the quality output of China meets our standards. Well, that's one way to undermine our military, but then you have to ask, do they really have quality standards themselves, or do they just assume that if you produce a million whatever, that will be good enough even if you have a 10% failure rate? And you make a great point that it hasn't been tested. I don't think anyone wants to test it. It is, again, a lot of face saving. This is that very cultural. You have to present that face. You have to present the strength. And what's really happening behind the scenes always remains a closed secret, because loyalty will be really get you killed.
Well,
so
then,
no one really wants to talk about it.
that begs the question: would China attack? Really attack from the air, from the sea? How would it be? Or again, would it be a lot of posturing, the saving of face? We're so powerful, we're so this. You can see it in the propaganda that comes to us with the goose stepping and so forth. But at the end of the day, are they strong? And if they really aren't strong, they're not going to try it, right?
They are strong economically.
Yes.
Again,
but militarily.
So no one requires them to export. Absolutely no one. They could on a dime say, yeah, we're just not exporting anymore. Look what's happening with the port jams in the supply chain. Due to COVID, they just stopped producing for a while because they had no labor. Then they stopped because they had no energy. So if they don't produce for us, we have no fail-safe. And the same thing is true for Taiwan. It would take a while for everyone to scramble to be able to support them as an individual island nation. And unfortunately, we're seeing that South Korea has not been as belligerent, let's say, in pushing back against China. Japan has stepped forward and said, we support Taiwan, we are against China. South Korea is a lot closer and a lot more tied economically, and I think is watching their P's and Q's in terms of how much support they will say, clearly with North Korea right above them as well. So I don't think it will come to a military issue, except if you want to frame it as economic warfare, which they have shown they have been winning hands down for the last few decades.
Right. And speaking of the economy, if it came to that, and there actually is war in Taiwan, that also is very, very expensive. And she's got her phalanges all over Asia, in part in Europe. Having all these ports in this Belt and Road Initiative, which I believe goes to the year 2032, something like that. I mean, this is expensive stuff. And when you've got third world nations and that aren't paying back the banks, yes, they may take over the land, but they need cash flow as well. So I wonder how they calculate the economic price by attacking Taiwan, My sense is that they won't, but I'm no expert on it.
Well, I'm not expert in much of this stuff, but I will say one of the issues with them trying to redefine what the world currency is part of this. They didn't want it in dollars, U.S. dollars. They don't want it in oil dollars either. They've been pushing for a digital currency. Now we see what's going on in Canada with the ability of a country to lock up assets with click of a finger, right? So this concept of digital currency comes with a lot of issues related to authoritarian power. But that is one of the things they have been trying to do. The other issue you should know is the pushback that she is getting from the other party members is specifically that the Chinese people are waking up and saying, well, we are sitting here spending Chinese dollars to Congo, to South America. Where is our benefit? Why are we doing this? And this is very typical for a lot of regimes from hundreds, thousands of years ago. They overextend. The Roman Empire did this. Alexandria did it. They all overextend thinking they can support it. And as soon it crumbles over its own weight. So the question is that what's happening now? And is Xi or the CCP nimble enough to figure out how to retract and still stay in power? Well,
they're very, very extended. And and when you don't pay that note, let's say certain areas in Africa that can't, certain countries in Africa that can't pay that note, well, okay, you got to take over our land, but still, where's the cash flow? And they need that.
Exactly.
Let's move on, Anne, in the time that we have, and concentrate on COVID and holding their feet to the fire for SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus. I am astonished that this administration, or even during that last year of President Trump's administration, and certainly this administration and other Western powers are not linking arms together to put China's feet to the fire, regardless of whether these countries think it came from an animal wet market or a spill in the Wuhan lab, although the latter is what most scholars now say that's where it happened. I tend to believe that. But nevertheless, it is the Chinese virus. Where is the pushback from Western countries? Will we ever see it?
Hopefully we will. I think the reality is we are still dependent on them for manufacturing, and I really don't want to be beating a dead horse, but it is true. If we are still getting all of our communications devices, our smartphones, which we use now more and more for healthcare, if we are getting our X-ray machines from China still, if you say, well, we want to hold them accountable, they'll say, fine, we're accountable. We're not going to ship any of this to you. And we are not ready yet. This would be like saying we're going to hold the Soviet Union accountable during the Cuban Missile Crisis before we knew what we were going to do. You know, they had a gun being held to our forehead right there. And, you know, President Trump has dealt with it, and I will acknowledge that President Biden's administration is trying still to move the ball forward on more American independent manufacturing. Europe has acknowledged this. Europe is doing much more on their own and trying to decouple. But they are much smaller than we are. Obviously, NATO is not working very well for them. And so they have to cope with their economic dependence on China, and probably are hoping that we get our act together so that they can relink back to us a little bit more.
Yeah, we are so dependent. When I talk to some scholars, some economists, and really financial people and manufacturing people, there are those that say, look, we can bring this back to factories here. We can have it all made in America. And I'm saying to myself, not so fast. I mean, we've seen what happened with COVID-19. Well, the masks come from there, the PPE stuff comes from there, all of the personal protective equipment. It all comes from there. So not so fast. And now that COVID with Omicron seems to be behind us, knock on wood, seems to be in the rear view mirror, I think it's going to, just like a rubber band, bounce right back. Factories are going to start roaring again, and we go on business as usual. However, there are those that say, no, we can have it all here. And I say that's fine, but where are the factories here? The plains of Kansas or Montana or South Dakota or where? And more to the point, I don't know why, if we don't want all the manufacturing here, we can't link arms with Mexico. Mexico is our neighbor. They're begging for jobs. That's why so many come here. We can get a better relationship with Mexico. It'd be closer. I just don't understand why we're not thinking this way, because we all talk about getting manufacturing back to the good USA, but I don't see factories being built here. Do you? Not at the volume that China has.
Not the volume, and never will. And you know, you've got run-ins with labor unions. You've got run-ins with capitalists. People don't want it. They want the benefits, but they don't want to make the hard choices and the priorities. And I think what USMCA, the renegotiated NAFTA that President Trump did, was excellent in terms of tying together Canada and Mexico to us, because you, as I said, you
very
have
good
those
point.
Resources, and you've got common borders, and between the three countries, we can be fairly well as independent on a lot of these issues, but it does take the will to do so.
Well, President Trump with the USMCA made a very, very concerted effort to get that North American bloc, Canada, United States, and Mexico together, to be friendlier and to get it more here on this side of the world. But I don't see it coming. I just don't. I talked to some young people about this, and one person, she's 25, she's got already headed for a PhD in political science. Smart gal, and she said, yeah, do you want, Terry, World War III? Is that what you want? I don't think it would come to World War III, but like you pointed out, cyber attacks, the outsmarting the United States without firing a shot, which is sort of Putin's playbook, right? Mm-hmm. They think alike that way. So breaking us in other ways where they don't have to test their military, but they test in other ways, holding products back. I mean, we weren't even getting ibuprofen there for a while during the early part of the COVID months.
Well, I'll tell you, if people are looking for leadership from Silicon Valley in terms of hardware manufacturing, it ain't here. And it hasn't been since, frankly, the Defense Department left in the 80s and 90s. This has become software. And the problem with the current generation, and actually all of us, I shouldn't just say the current generation, we've gotten so used to things happening in a couple months. Well, the fact of the matter is it takes years. The logistics involved in building and mining and processing, and let alone the government side of regulation. It just takes time. Now, I will say to your point that there are a number of people, a lot of vets, who served in Iraq and Afghanistan for many, many years, who are tired. You probably see them running for office. I see them standing up here and saying, hey, this is stupid. Let's figure this out. Let's make manufacturing. And they're cobbling together supply chains. I've got a factory here. I've got a warehouse here. How can we do this? What states are most friendly for some of this? And these guys are working together. They understand logistics, and they are patriots to their core. They do not want to see American fail. So I'm really hopeful that the next generation, especially of young men who serve, not just young men, but the fact of the matter is those are the ones who are interested in this kind of stuff, really do step up and show some good leadership. Elon Musk has surprised me. I'm not a huge fan of him, but boy, has he been able to at least capture the bully pulpit and call it the way it is in terms of our reliance on minerals and the way the government has gotten in our way. And bully for him. That's great.
Why are you not a fan of his?
Because when he started out here with Solyndra and solar panels, he is very good at getting federal money and federal grants to support his brain children. And so he went from solar panels to electric vehicles, now to space flight. And if you really look and say, what has he done? He's pushed the edge of the envelope on technology, and that's great. You always need an evangelist to do that. But in terms of really building quality products that are going to last, there are probably better ones out there. He's very similar to Steve Jobs. A couple good products, a hugely passionate fan base, but it's not going to work for the regular Joe. It's just too expensive. Teslas are crazy.
Teslas
they don't
are
work
so expensive.
in
Right.
bad weather very well.
And not only that, I'm going to do a whole show on the American grid, electric grid. And I'll tell you, when you plug in a Tesla and you got a grid that may go down, it's just another vehicle, another item that needs electrical power. And our grid, the Eastern grid, the Texas grid, and the Western grid is extremely vulnerable. But back to Elon Musk for just a minute. You like him now, just to be clear, you like him now because he's speaking out about our need for rare earth metals and our need for manufacturing to be here. So I would agree. He's now more of an activist. He still is an inventor. He still is a big thinker, futuristic guy, but he is an activist as well. And I've come to respect him a lot more. I never disliked him. You know him better than I do, and you know his history in Silicon Valley way better than I do. But I've come to respect him more, like him more, because he's now expanding his thoughts about his inventions and his futuristic ideas to say, here's the practical reality behind all of this. And we can't do any of it unless we've got rare earth elements, for example, unless we've got a strong military, for example, unless this. And I appreciate that from him because he does have a huge fan base.
Yeah, we haven't had really good quality business leadership for a while. I think Wall Street has dominated. And as manufacturing went over to China, what we would consider our industrial leaders, what are they doing? They're managing shareholder value and managing ESG programs. They're not really managing the logistics and the pragmatism that is necessary. And I think what you saw when President Trump did the DPA Act and really got some manufacturers going again to do the ventilators, for example, you saw a handful of companies just step up without a hesitation and said, we can do this, and they did it. And those are the leaders you don't hear much about. Have you heard about anyone from UPS or Honeywell?
No,
because they're not returning the shareholder value. We hear about Tim... I was going to say Steve Jobs. That's not right. The head of Apple and Tim Cook. Thank you.
Cook.
Elon Musk a lot. But Elon's the one who's got the pragmatism because he's doing hardware.
We don't have too much time left. In fact, I'm given the wrap for 3 minutes. We only have about 3 minutes. But before you leave, I wanted your take on the Australia August pack of last year with regard to submarines. And the submarines that Australia, that whole pack where France got kind of kicked to the curb a little bit, and there's a new pact between the United States, Great Britain, and Australia, helping with submarines, helping Australia against a possible Chinese attack on her. What's your take? We're down to about 2 minutes.
Well, these advanced submarines that require, like run quiet, run deep, they require magnets. Magnets require critical minerals, and Australia has them. So there is a good reason for them to be part of this alliance. There's and they are very vulnerable. They're the largest, closest Western civilization there in China's sphere. And I think for them to take the lead and say we want to push back on that, I think is great. And they're probably supplying a lot of the necessary components. And clearly then that becomes a base for us to work from if we want to push back with the same kind of posturing that she has in terms of posturing our strength.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was surprised to learn, and I did not know this prior, that these do not carry nuclear weapons, these submarines, but they could be equipped with nuclear weapons down the road. And they can stay in the ocean for how many years? Like 25 years or something? Just this very long period of time. I mean, I was quite surprised to learn about all that. Final thoughts on all things China, since we covered a lot of ground with you. We're down to about a minute, Anne. I'll give you the last word.
I want to point out something that really hit me between the eyes, and I think frames much of the discussion about why China has been beating us on minerals and metals. When we think about the elements, we think about 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth. Mm-hmm. They actually think about 5: fire, air, water, plants, and metal. They have 5 elements. Those shape their worldview. They shape the priorities of their culture, and they understand that metals and minerals advance civilizations. If you don't have weaponry, if you don't have industry, you do not have a civilization. True. And until America and the West can kind of grapple with that and not be beholden to the environmentalists pushing clean and green and peace and love, they are going to beat us every single time. So just get your brain wrapped around the fact that they have 5, we have 4, and that's the enemy competitor we up against. Mm-hmm.
How do people find you and get your book, Rare Metal? Such a good read.
Thank you. You can do a search, Silicon Valley, Ann Bridges will probably pull me up, or authorannbridges.wordpress.com, and my books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, wherever you want to buy a book.
And it's A-N-N, not A-N-N-E. People make that mistake a lot. Ann Bridges, I hope you come back. We'll talk about China again. You're a world of knowledge with regard to China, and you keep it in lay speak so the average American can understand. I know we covered a lot, and I appreciate you for it. I'm Terry Gilbert. This has been Timeline with Terry. I'll see you tomorrow on another edition with a Timeline topic. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.